Welcome to another CEO Wisdom podcast. We have Jacqueline van den Ende with us. She is co-founder and CEO at Carbon Equity. We're going to talk about ESG. We're going to talk about green tech, climate tech, everything in between. Jacqueline's background. We're going to talk about VC, rocket internet, CEO-ship, startups, everything in between. This podcast brought to you by podfire.com. If you want to start, scale, or be invited to a podcast like this one, have amazing guests like Jacqueline, talk with them, get insights, exchange audiences, and even get leads and clients. Who knows? Jacqueline, welcome to the pod. Really glad to have you on. Can you tell us about yourself and Carbon Equity?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Charles. As you mentioned, co-founder and CEO of Carbon Equity. I am half entrepreneur, half investor. Spent half my life as a private equity investor, as a VC partner, and half as an entrepreneur, starting off as a student entrepreneur, then a rocket internet entrepreneur, then a CEO of a big fintech company, and now running Carbon Equity. And Carbon Equity is a climate venture capital and private equity fund investing platform that enables you to invest in dozens up to hundreds of really cool climate tech companies together with the world's best climate investors, up to Al Gore himself, for example. Yeah.
Tell me about Lamudi, because Rocket Internet is one of my favorite companies out there. They really systematized the process of startup building. They popularized the copy paste improve model, which I love. I use it every day. Yes. A lot of people hate it. They're like, come up with an original idea, reinvent the wheel. I'm like, no, dude. This world's about energy, and I want to save energy. If there's something that works, I want to exactly have a carbon copy of it and improve it. Obviously, I'm going to experiment. I'm going to try A/B tests to see if it can be improved. But startup is about speed. It's about quantity and impact. So if you want to go fast, you sort of need to do that. And you'd be the first person to actually come on this pod, Jacqueline, to tell us about that. So tell us about your insights and what you learned there.
Yeah, I think the fundamental philosophy of Rocket Internet was that entrepreneurship is 10% idea and 90% execution. So, and that's the case because I do believe in that probably the most impactful and lasting companies are original ideas, not copycats. But that said, having an idea in itself is not at all a recipe for success, right? And the big difference between successful founders and unsuccessful founders is quality of execution, and Rocket Internet was extremely good. And what they did very well was find a business model that makes sense universally, find the very best talent you can. So they hired management consultants and private equity people, just people with a good set of people who could think people had a lot of grit. People were adventurous enough to cancel their luxurious private equity job and move to the Philippines, and that was the kind of profile. I have to say it was also pretty neo-colonial in retrospect, because they would basically get super young, unexperienced white people from Europe and then park them in a random country somewhere else in the world and expect them to do much better than locals would, which I now think about a little bit differently than I did back then. But Rocket excelled at data drive, very clear focus, execution, fundraising, and just go, go, go.
So
and it worked.
That's the thing. It worked, and we've heard wilder story. I read this guy's book, Black Unicorn, I believe it's called. Marius. I forgot where he was from, probably from Poland. And he was parked in the middle of Nigeria, in the 2005, I think. And that must have been pretty chaotic in a country that goes out of electricity every day and so forth. I've been to Philippines exactly at the time that you were there, and Philippines. I was in Manila, and it was not super developed and kind of wild. So, but they trusted your brain, and so they were like, Jacqueline is smart. She's able to probably adapt quickly and run the business from there. So I guess that was the mindset, and they really filtered the founders. How did they find you, and What caught their attention in you, like the skills?
I found them. So I was working in private equity. I had founded a pretty successful student company when I was a student, and I really wanted to go back to entrepreneurship. So I just started asking my network. I just started telling everybody, I want to be a startup entrepreneur. What's your advice? And somebody said, well, you should talk to this guy. And he was with Rocket Internet, and I had no idea what Rocket Internet was. And he was like, okay, well, great that you want to be an entrepreneur. How about going to the Philippines? And yeah, I was single and ready for an adventure. So I quit my job, and a month later, I was living in Manila. Yeah, but there were very wild stories. I was actually lucky with the Philippines, but I had friends who were sent to Myanmar, and they would have to go to other countries like Bangladesh and pick up piles of cash and literally travel to Myanmar with like a suitcase full of cash because they didn't have ATMs there. And it was, yeah. So, but the Philippines was a very pleasant country to live.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they have a budget like of like, and they would call it in the accounting database like not getting kidnapped budget or something like that.
Yes, yeah, probably. Yes, it was not undangerous, I would say, in certain countries. Philippines was very safe and a really awesome place to live. But yeah.
Interesting. Tell me about, yeah, that first business, the client consultant, I believe it was called. How did you started that one? Why do you think you were so successful as a student? I wasn't. I started a bunch of businesses. I failed 90% of the time.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, the Kleine Consultant is the Netherlands' largest student-run strategy consultant. It is 15 years old this year. It's really alive and kicking. It has offices in every Dutch university town in the Netherlands. I came across this idea at the intersection. I strongly believe that good ideas come at the intersection of things that are very different. So I was a student. I was studying economics. I got invited to all of these business courses at big strategy consultants. So I would go to business courses at Bain and BCG and McKinsey, etc. And I noticed that in a pretty short time, students could solve difficult business cases. And at the same time, I was working in a cinema, the smallest and oldest cinema of Amsterdam. And I was working with a bunch of film students. And my film student friends thought, well, Jackie studies economics. She can do Excel. She should give us advice on her business because they want to start a film company. And they couldn't figure out there were 6 people. Everybody wanted something else. So I sat with them for 2 hours. What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? And then an advice rolled out of me and said, I think this is what you should do. And so within 6 months, within 2 hours, we solved the problem that they had been trying to solve for 6 months. And I literally remember walking out of the cinema that night and whilst unlocking my bike, I suddenly had the vision of the Kleine Consultant where, okay, on one hand, you have all of these talented students going to these strategy consulting business courses. On the other hand, you have tons of small businesses, NGOs, nonprofits, SMEs that would be dying to hire McKinsey, but they can't afford it. So what I did is I basically have those students work in teams as strategy consultants for any kind of business that needs to hire McKinsey but can't afford it. And those students are coached by professional consultants. So the professional consultants get a super valuable talent base. The customers get free or affordable strategic advice, and the consultants, they get top-notch training and coaching by top strategy consultants and super relevant and very fun work experience. And sort of like the holy trinity of everything matched. And carbon equity or the Kleine Consultant was really an example of a business that it had immediate product market fit. We started pitching it. I just started telling people about it. And immediately people were like, how can I join? How can I be a partner, etc. And then other people in other cities started noticing us and reached out and said, like, how do I start a Kleine Consultant in my town? And this is how we started building that.
So I might have followed your advice back then because you're a genius, I think, but I think most consultant, I would never follow any consultant's advice, even McKinsey or Bain, or at least I'd talk with them, exchange with them. But and now, like following the advice of a student, I think, yeah, I'd better shut down my business than do that. Like, you think this is a bit extreme, but that's my gut reaction.
Yeah, no, fair enough. But for people who, so what does a consultant do? They structure your problem They do data research and they inform you with some insights. And ultimately, it's typically not sort of like following the advice of a consultant, but rather going through the process of structuring your problem, understanding what the problem is really about, and then doing data-driven analysis on that, which informs your point of view. So consultancy should never be blindly followed, but rather be an input in your overall decision making and just getting an external view. And that was very valuable. We worked with Syrian refugees, but we also worked with a commercial aerospace company. We gave advice to McKinsey themselves, to the Financial Times, looking to target student audiences, etc. So it was a really, really fun kind of company.
And if it's still live today, must be working pretty well. Do you feel that world is changing nowadays? I've heard a lot lately that, yeah, McKinsey and BCG, they're not the same as they were before. They don't benefit from the same good reputation. People and even big corporations are unsure to hire them. It seems like the glory days are somewhat over. And how does AI mix into that also?
Yeah, fair enough. I think that strategy consulting will be around for a long time. I think there will always be a demand for external advice. I do think a lot of young people are making different choices now than back then. And this is a type of industry that solely depends on talent. At Carbon Equity, we see hundreds of applicants for every vacancy that we have because people want to work with purpose. And, working at a McKinsey or BCG, who also are trying to do more in the impact space, but also, advise big financial industries or legacy industries. That's just something that a lot of young people don't want to do anymore or don't see a purpose in. And a lot of young people are less purely financially driven than the older generation. So I think the pool on talent will probably be less than it was a while ago. I think AI, sure, will be a tool that can in part replace consultants, but I think initially it will primarily leverage, and consultants will just use a lot of AI tooling and be more efficient for it, or perhaps have more effective insights for it. But I don't think you're going to have the McKinsey AI that will completely replace it. I think it will be more in sync, at least in the near term.
Or what about like an AI that just crunches all the advice ever given of all the consultants and builds something better? What do you think about that?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely possible. I mean, there are a lot of like young analysts who are sitting in a basement, crunching tons of numbers. All of that can be done much better by AI, and it will have an impact. So I think the roles that are most shielded from AI is social roles, which are relational, right? That's where AI will be last to replace us, I think. Yeah.
Tell us about your current journey that you embarked. You embarked in that journey, 3 years ago with Carbon Equity. Why?
Yeah.
And what are you seeking to accomplish for the rest of this year?
Yeah. Why? Because I think climate change is the biggest challenge to solve for our generation. I think it's an existential risk to humanity and, by the way, the rest of all living species on our planet. And what I try to do is to unlock capital, private capital, at a scale of billions to help fund technology innovations that help solve our global challenges, starting with climate change. And so we think that so Carbon Equity is basically a platform where you can invest in a top climate VC or private equity single fund, or in a basket, a portfolio of all of these climate funds. And this is the top 5% of best performing and most impactful climate funds there are. And we try to lower the minimum to participate. Typically you need several millions to be able to invest in a VC or PE fund. Carbon Equity lowers that threshold now to $100,000, but soon down to $25,000. So that really opens it up to anybody with a pension, a bonus, some savings to invest in Climatech, which, by the way, is, yes, you have a lot of impact, but it's also a high return type investment. So we target returns in the 10 to 15% range for a fund of funds on an annual basis, and 15 to 25% for a single fund, which is slightly higher risk, but also potentially a higher return. And we think that for your average private individual who has anywhere between 100,000 euros and a million to spend in total, that it just makes a hell of a lot of sense to invest in a fund or in a fund of fund structure, because you're not betting on one company, you're betting on 100, 200 different climate tech companies, early stage, late stage, Europe, US, agro, food, built environment, industry, mobility. So it's super risk diversified, and it makes it a very sensible investment for your average private individual who wants to be investing in the theme climate tech.
So I read here on your LinkedIn in Q3 2021, 2.4 billion were invested. Pretty sure that this number has doubled because there's such a craze right now for climate tech and green tech.
Yeah.
Pretty sure the total market, or the total investment in that market, is at least 500 billion a year. Is that an accurate number?
Yeah, it depends if you're looking at the VC PE market, or if you're looking at the overall the overall space of green investment. So I think McKinsey just published that the overall amount invested in both infrastructure and technology is 1.7 trillion last year. And only a fraction of that, several billions, is within pure climate tech VC. So, and it's definitely a growing number.
So you'd want to get 1 or 2% of that market. Are you only focused in Europe? Because Europe is quite bullish on climate tech. Thank God. They're leaders in that field, which is amazing. Are you taking investors from all over the world?
We are. So we are accessible for investors from all over the world, but we cannot market all over the world. So people are interested in investing carbon equity from who are not living in the Netherlands or Belgium at this point need to contact us. And then you have something called reverse solicitation, where we're able to accept customers from other parts in the world. But soon we will have a European marketing license, and then we will be actively marketing in all of the European countries, and not yet in the States. Hopefully by 2024, 2025, and we will also set up structures for the US.
And you're aiming, your investors are aiming to do 2 or 2.5x return in 13 years, which is lower than a typical VC of 10x. I invest in 10 to 50 startups, and one will moonshot 10 to 100x. So how do you compete with that? Is it that they need to have a part of their portfolio in the environment? Is it part of their branding and ESG? How do you convince them?
2 to 2.5x is the return expectation from the moment that your money goes into the fund until the moment it comes out of the fund, and that return cycle is much faster. So you should expect to get your first returns by year 5, be break even by year 7, and have all of your returns by year 11 or 12. Typically, when you invest in a fund, in a VC fund, a good performance is a superior performance. Top quartile fund would return 3x your money, net money multiple. In a fund of funds, you would expect to get 2 to 2.5x, because you are more risk diversified. So not every VC fund is going to be a top quartile performing fund. So if you invest in a single VC fund, you can make 3x if you're in a top quartile fund, but it could also be 1x or 0.8. In a fund of funds, the risk of losing capital is statistically 1.5%. So that's super low, but also you're going to have less outside performance. So you should expect to get 2.5 times your money back, which is on an annual basis, that's a 10 to 15% annual return, which is definitely bigger than on the stock exchange. And it is much more risk diversified.
Love it. Quite bullish on your company, and I love the website. Last thing, what very cool startups have you seen in the field?
Yeah, a lot. So there are a lot of Very cool companies working on energy storage, for example. One of them is Form Energy. They do iron air battery storage. So they basically have massive iron batteries. And when a current runs through them, the iron derusts. And when there's no current, it rusts. And this reversible rusting process can save up to 100 hours of energy and at 10% the cost of lithium batteries. And then there's another company called Noon Energy. And what they are doing is they're splitting carbon into C and O2. And with that energy of splitting, so when electricity runs through the carbon molecules, it splits the molecule. And then when it comes back, it releases the energy. So similar kind of process, like a reversible process that can store and save energy. And I think this is an example of like a really a booming technology. So much happening in cement alternatives, carbon capture, hydrogen. There are lots and lots of really cool innovations all across the space.
Science is magic. Thank you so much for showing up today, Jacqueline. Where can people find out more about you?
Carbonequity.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn or connect with me on LinkedIn. Pretty active there. Yeah, that's it. And listen to, obviously, to Charles's podcast to learn more.
And to yours, because you also have podcasts and you're on various also. So thank you so much for tuning in, people. I'm Charles Cormier, host of VC and Founder Wisdom Podcast.